surrounded me. Remember he said that? There was no place for him to flee. If he looked up, there was wrath. If he looked down, there was wrath. If he looked to the left, the right, there was wrath. He was hemmed in by all the judgment and wrath of God against evil. It was real. It was real. Galatians 5. Verse 2, and just as Christ also loved you and gave himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. Now he's telling us, now, before we get to our commentary here, I just want us to look at some things. Christ gave himself up at a moment in time, in an event. There is a sense in which the moment he came from heaven, he gave himself. Being incarnate, gave himself. The self-giving of Christ didn't begin in the cross. It was the moment he left aside the glories of heaven. But at the same time, what he's pointing us to here is the cross. Christ gave himself up. But I want you to notice something. He's telling us to walk, to live our entire life love that was manifested on Calvary. Christ suffered and died that day on Calvary. That kind of love he wants us to exhibit every day of our life. I was given a question recently on a panel about martyrdom. And I said this. I said, you know, I have had several times been in very dangerous situations where I could have lost my life. I can count about 5 specifically. And on the mission field. And the amazing thing is I am not a valiant man. But when those times occurred, there was a peace. And I don't want to take anything from martyrdom. But I think it is much more difficult to die daily than it is to die once. You have been called a spectacular thing, or give one grand showing of the self. But you and I are called to walk in that kind of love every day of life. That's amazing. Walk in love. Christ also loved you and gave himself up for us. An offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. Here we see the two things that are spectacular. The Godwardness of the death of Christ and the manwardness of the death of Christ. Godwardness in this. He died for God. An offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma for God. But he also died for man. He loved us. We're to live our lives that way. And here is something that really plus stability. If you show love to men, they are not always going to find. This in itself will discourage you, to say the least. It will discourage you. Let's say you go to the mission field and you do it out of love, and you go to men, and you find out they do not appreciate it. And even if you give of yourself, they may ask you for more and get mad that you did not give more. You pour yourself and they get angry with you because you're selfish. You're going to hear that. Now that's just, but you don't just look at the man with this. I'm doing it love of men. But at that moment, when men least respond to the love you're showing, you can have joy. Why? Because at that moment, you're the greatest of fragrances to God. You see that? When you are going ahead and loving men, even though they despise you, the fragrant aroma is greater Godward. And that is why you should not be discouraged. If you just say you're doing this for God, you're probably not. Because the one who does love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength will love their neighbor as themselves. But when your neighbor doesn't respond in kind and you feel so discouraged, just realize this whole thing is going Godward. It is a fragrant aroma to Christ. And your peace returns back on you. The peace and the love that you're trying to give returns back on you.